this. What we're going to work on today is we're going to work on a little bit of body control from the back forward, kind of getting control of its back, its shoulders, a little bit of lateral and vertical. We're here to do a lot of trail riding, or trail riding, and whenever you do trail riding, you use a lot of back forward. When you start to do performance, you use from the hind end forward a lot. So whenever you're out on trails, you may come up upon obstacles where you have to either counter bend around something, or you have to go around a tree like this, or you may even have to side pass off of something, or you may even have to back up. And then you may have to turn around on the trail or anything. A lot of control that you really need whenever you're riding the trails. And when it comes to body control, there's really two parts that equal what I call harmony. There's a mechanical part, and then there's the feel part of it. The mechanical part is what you've probably have been bombarded with. You're kind of probably tired of, and that's, okay, I pick my reins up, I put my reins here, I put my leg in here, my horse moves sideways and things like that. But you just lack that softness, that feel. And that's the second part of the equation. Whenever you get the mechanics behind it and the application, and then you establish the feel, that's when you start to get the harmony. Harmony, like, let's say whenever you have a musical instruments, you can't have one musical instrument be a harmony. It takes more than one instrument to make a harmony. And whenever you want body control, if you want that nice soft feel in your body control, it takes the dynamics and mechanics behind the application of it, and it also takes the feel. Now the feel is something that I can't really give you, but I can break it down to help you develop that feel. When you're developing that feel, one of the key things to it is simply establishing a starting point and building on it. Whenever you're starting to apply the mechanical part of it, I see a lot of people try to bring too many things together. I'll give you an example. People, they'll see clinicians out here or something, and they'll see them kind of start to two-track a little bit, like this, and they're wondering, okay, well, I want to do that. So what do? They just start to drive their horse forward. They put a little bend, and their horse ends up going this way. Then they put the leg in, then the horse straightens back up, just because you don't have the body parts broken down yet, basically, okay? So in the technical application of it, what I like to do is break down all 5 body parts, get them soft, supple, and independent of one another. Then I bring them to execute a maneuver. I'll give you a good example. Whenever you're doing say a lead departure, a lot of people get tunnel vision and they think hind quarter control, hind quarter control, hind quarter control. Well, you do need a lot of good hind quarter control if you're going to execute what I call a proper lead departure, lead change. But if you really break it down, you're really using all 5 body parts. Let me illustrate what I'm talking about. The first body part is the head and the neck. Whenever I start to do a lead departure or a lead change, I kind of want my horse's head tipped in the direction he's going to go. So if I'm going to take a left lead here, I want his body cocked like this. Now I'm over exaggerating, of course, for illustration purposes, but I want his body cocked like this, and I want his head looking in that direction. If his head's looking to the right and I'm going to pick up a left lead, he could end up crossfiring, picking up the wrong lead, crossfiring, and that's what you don't want. So you want to have him nice soft so that when you send him up into that departure and start to push him, he's not going to straighten out on you. You want to have that softness right here. You also want a little bit of shoulder control, because when you start to put that leg back there, what happens a lot of times is your horse just wants to straighten up on you. They can't hold that shoulder back. So you want enough shoulder control, and you want to get it good enough and soft enough to where with your reins you can hold it back. You don't have to depend on your legs. Sometimes you do, but the more advanced you get, your rein ought to be able to hold that shoulder back to where you can kick those hindquarters around, okay? The second part is the rib cage. I want to make sure that I have a bend in my rib cage that is nice and soft, because when you start to do lead departure, you're literally putting the front feet on one track and you're putting the back feet on a separate track, getting them to walk forward before you do your departure, basically, okay? So you got to have good rib cage softness, and then of course hindquarter control to push the hindquarters over. You also want to have good vertical flexion, or at least I like to have good vertical flexion. And the reason why is because when you do vertical flexion and you round that horse's back, his back's round, his legs come up underneath him. If he's hollowed out, his legs are spread out. But if his back's rounded, his legs come up underneath him and they kind of bunch him up. So if he's kind of bunched up a little bit because he has that vertical flexion and his hips are over, his first stride is going to be that reach. It's going to be that lead so that he can get his balance. If he's all hollowed out like this, he can just do whatever he wants, just kind of wobble around like this. But if you have him framed up, his legs up underneath him, and his hindquarters are over, his first step, he's going to have to reach to get his balance. And there's your lead right there. So whenever you start to do things like lead departures and things like that, you really use more than one body part. So don't get tunnel vision on just one body part. That's why I break the body parts down, get them soft, supple, independent of one another, and then I start to bring them to execute maneuvers and go to a higher level. Now when it comes to the feel part of it, that was the application. When it comes to the feel part of it, again, you always establish a starting point and you build on it. I'll give you a good example like hind quarter control. This guy here, whenever I bend his head and I put my leg in, he should just go until I take my leg out. He's nice, he's soft, he's quiet, and he should just stay doing this until I take my leg out. When I take my leg out, boom, he should stop. In the very beginning on some of the clinicians that you've seen, the more popular clinicians, there's a lot of truth to what they say. All you do in the beginning, you put your leg in, you get one step, you take it out. You wait for him to take one step, and then you release, you give him affirmation. You start with one step and build on it, 2, 3, 5, 8, 12, until he's just continually going around. And whenever he goes around, you want to make sure that he's really soft and really light. Whenever you ask your horse, whenever you pick up on the reins or you put your leg in, this is where a lot of people make their mistake. What they do, or what they don't do, is I'll flex my horse's head here, and then he gets off that pressure, then I release. What a lot of people do is they'll pick up, they'll bend his head around, his head's bent, but he's still just pulling like a freight train like this. And then they go ahead and release. And they wonder why they don't have a soft horse, okay? You never release that pressure until they give. When you apply a leg or a hand, you only release when they finally soften. That's their reward, basically, okay? And that's starting incrementally, starting at a starting point and then building on it. Same thing with, say, a two-track. Whenever I start my horses on the two-tracking, what I'll do is I'll get them finally all framed up, and I'll get one step, and then when it finally feels soft, boom, I let them out of it. Just because they're two-tracking here, if they're pulling and leaning on me, I don't release until I get that soft feel, then I cut them loose, okay? So that's the two aspects to get the harmony that you're always looking for. You see people that are really nice and soft and light horses, that's the secret to it. It's not that big of a deal, okay? So does anybody have any questions on what I've just covered? That's more the philosophy part of it. Does anybody have any questions on that? No? Okay, what we're going to do, we're under time frame, so we're going to go ahead and start getting on some exercises right quick to help us out as we go on the trail rides, and you can take this and get it better. I'll be available later on. Lanny will be available later on. You can come to us and we can help you out if you have any problems later on after the clinic. But right now what we're going to work on is we're going to work on lateral flexion, okay? That's the first step in my program is just lateral flexion. And some of you are probably going, oh my goodness, not lateral flexion. I've heard that so much, I'm bored to tears with it. I want to go to another clinic. Okay, I start out in the beginning for safety with my colts and everything like that. It leads up into your upper level stuff like we were talking about with the two-track and other things like that, and your departures, counter bends, stuff like that. Now why I do it in the beginning for safety is because if I have a horse who wants to buck, bolt, dart, rear, I want to make sure that I have the one range stop. If I start to teach him this suppleness and he wants to get a little hawky with me and take off or just get an attitude, I want to make sure I can get that horse's head bent around if I don't feel confident that he's just going to go through it calmly. Now, why this is so important, what you do when you do your lateral flexion, you simply pick up, bend his head around 3/4 of the way, and you wait for him to give that last quarter. When he gives, you release. Now, why this is so important in the beginning, the analogy that I like to use is everyone look at this white truck over here, okay? Let's ask yourself, where does the power come from in that truck? It comes from the rear end. Well, no, actually it comes from the engine. That's where the power comes from, okay? The power comes from the engine. Now the wheels make it go, right? What transfers the energy from the engine to the wheels? The transmission and drive shaft, right? Okay, now let's look at the horse. Where does all the power come from in a horse? It comes from the hind end. Okay, when a horse wants to buck, bolt, dart, rear, it uses its legs, okay? Now ask yourself, what transfers the energy throughout the horse's body from the hindquarters to the legs? The spine does, okay? Now let's go back and look at that truck. What would happen if I bent the drive shaft in that truck? Wouldn't go anywhere, would it? Because it could not transfer energy effectively the way it was designed, okay? Now when a horse wants to buck, bolt, dart, rear, and do all those things you don't want it to do, you don't naturally see it doing it like this, do you? Its head's always in a straight line and usually down to get its back rounded, okay? So what I want to do is I want to use the same principle right there to shut my horse down. I want to be able to bend his head around, and shut that horse down, okay? So body part number 1 that we're going to work on is the head and neck. Body part number 2 that I like to work on is vertical flexion. I want to be able to make sure that I can drive my horse forward and get his back really rounded, head tucked in, and do it with fingertip lightness, just like this. I'm just holding this with fingertip lightness right here. And this is an ultimate goal. I mean, you're not going to get this today, but over time, this is part of the feel. I'm not really cranking on that horse and making him get down, but over time, when you develop feel, you can feel what that horse is communicating to you through the reins, and you'll be working in harmony together after the application and the feel is applied to it. Then you get the harmony right here, just like this. Okay, but it takes time.